Welcome back to my series on simple flies. I'm Raj Kletke, and today we'll be examining several simple flies for midge hatches and tying and fishing the Tummel Fly, another one of the 6 simple flies that I catch most of my trout on. We've already looked at midge hatches in my earlier series, and I would recommend reviewing those videos. They actually cover the hatches better, but today we'll be supplementing with some additional information. As the emerging midge pupas become concentrated just below, in, or on the surface, the weighted zebra midge may no longer work, so we'll need some additional patterns. Most commonly, you'll be fishing these hatches on relatively flat, quiet water. In quiet water, the midge pupa rise for a while and are oriented vertically at first, but before emergence they become oriented horizontally. Emergence then takes place. However, these small flies are emerging in quiet water, in other words, areas with high surface tension, and many failures will occur. As always, the conditions help define the needed patterns. I've not found that we have to distinguish between a vertical or horizontally oriented pupa. I tie a variant of a zebra midge, leaving off the bead and adding a little polypropylene, CDC, Antron, Zelon, or even a few white hackle fibers as an emerging wing. I tie these on either an emerging hook or a straight hook. Start with a size 20 and you can add other sizes later if needed. The classic adult pattern used by most fishermen for a midge hatch is the griffith's gnat. Note how the hackle tips would cause dimpling of the surface. Likely it represents a midge cluster, which is fairly common, especially in heavy hatches. I usually tie up some 18s to 20s to start with. On these size hooks, I like pre-wrapping the bare hook with thread. If you're not familiar with the eye length of the bare hook at the front, please review my beginning fly tying series to help clarify why I do this. On smaller sizes, usually 24s and smaller, many tiers just tie in a grizzly hackle at the back. They palmer it forward in fairly tight spirals to the tie-off point. That's very simple, and yet it works fine. On the 18s to 22s, I still prefer the classic underwrap of a peacock herl. Most start the peacock herl in front of the hackle, which gives a little more messy fly. By putting one wrap of the peacock herl behind the hackle first and then winding the herl forward, you get a neater looking fly. Midge clusters do give messy dimpling on the water surface, so the one on the left does seem more logical, but for some reason I still like the looks of the neater one, so usually I tie that. I don't think it really makes a difference to the trout. After tying off the herl near the front of the hook, palmer the hackle over the top, again in fairly tight spirals, before tying it off. Add a small head and whip finish twice. Again, it's a very simple and yet effective fly. This is an adult midge caught in the surface. Remember the surface dimpling of the griffith's gnat? Note the dimpling of the surface here as bright spots of light. Trout certainly recognize those dimplings. In fact, I think that is one reason the griffith's gnat is so effective. However, some of these adults get washed under the surface, and it seems to me that the trout are particularly fond of these cripples just below the surface. This explains my favorite fly for many midge hatches, the Tummel Fly. Evidently it was named after the river it was first fished on. To see the full video of tying this fly, see my Hatches series, part 12. I tie this on straight shaft dry fly hooks in sizes 20 and smaller. My most common ties are on size 22s and 24s, although here I'm using a larger hook so that it shows up better on the video. Incidentally, I do use large eye hooks on all my flies smaller than size 18 and recommend this to those of my age. Start your 8/0 black thread, leaving an eye length of bare hook at the front of the fly, and put on an extra fine silver wire on the near side for ribbing. Take your thread and ribbing back no more than half the hook shank. Then wind your thread forward to the ribbing tie-off point and put in some extra thread wraps which will unwind to the correct point as you reverse wind the ribbing. Then tie off the ribbing and break off the excess. I will occasionally tie one with a stiffer hackle to fish in riffled water, but this fly is usually fished on relatively quiet water, so a soft hackle, such as a starling hackle, is generally better. Prepare the proper size hackle to either tie it in by the tip or prepare it to tie it in at the base. Here I'm tying the hackle in by the base with the convex side forward. Take 2 wraps, tie it off, and put on a small head. The proper hackle length is about 1.5 to 2 times the hook gap. These are all small flies, and commonly numerous naturals are also present on the water. So how do you get the trout to notice and take your fly? The pupa struggles to emerge, the adults scoot a little on the surface, and the wind may blow midge clusters. Even the subsurface cripples may still be struggling a little, so a little movement often causes the trout to notice your fly. But I emphasize tiny movement. I usually start with a dead drift with any of these patterns and add tiny movement if the trout are ignoring my flies in favor of the naturals. This slight movement seems especially effective with the Tummel Fly. While the classical Griffith's gnat and pupa imitations are most fishermen's favorite flies during a midge hatch, with very good reason, my personal favorite, as I said earlier, is the Tummel Fly. Try all patterns and see what you like. The Tummel Fly is very versatile as it can be fished in flat water or slightly riffled water, with wet fly techniques, dead drift, upstream or down. On heavily fished water, it is a pattern that the trout don't always see, and fishes as a subsurface adult or cripple that not many fishermen seem to target. Trout don't seem to be as shy about taking it as some of the more common patterns, but I have had times when only the Griffith's gnat worked. You may have noticed that the Griffith's gnat is the only on-the-surface true dry fly I've talked about, and I think it represents a midge cluster. What about during sparse hatches? Are there always midge clusters? What about fishing a single midge pattern? Well, yes, there are 2 patterns that I use as a single midge. My favorite one I use more commonly for small mayflies. However, it is very effective for midges or small mayflies. It's simple to tie and one that I catch lots of trout on. It belongs in this series on simple flies that I catch most of my trout on. So join me next time when we'll tie and fish the simple wrap dry fly. I'm Raj Kletke, and I'll see you soon.